All this morning and welcome to the third day of the virtual Choose Clean Water Coalition Conference. I'm Jen Myhills, Executive Director of the Mid-Atlantic Regional Center with National Wildlife Federation. And just as a quick reminder this morning that the session is being recorded and will be shared following the conference. Also a reminder to everyone to please remember to mute your line to avoid any additional background noise. So I have the great pleasure this morning of introducing our guest speaker, Senator Chris Van Hollen of Maryland. Serving in Congress since 2002 and the United States Senate since 2017, Senator Van Hollen has been a tireless fighter for clean water and the Chesapeake Bay. Senator Van Hollen is a crucial ally in securing the vital federal investments to ensure that the Chesapeake Bay cleanup and other environmental cleanup programs remain on track and on the path to restoration. Recently, Senator Van Hollen also led the effort on the Chesapeake Wild Bill, which created a new grant program within the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service to support habitat restoration in the Bay region. We're so thrilled to have Senator Van Hollen with us this morning. Following his remarks, there'll be a brief question and answer session. But without further ado, I'd like to turn it over to Senator Van Hollen. Welcome.
Well, thank you, Jen. And let me start by thanking you for all you do with the Wildlife Federation, and to all the members of the Choose Clean Water Coalition. It's great to be back with you. I think I've joined with you every year since 2013. And I just want to start by saluting all of you for keeping and building this great coalition to protect our water, protect the Chesapeake Bay. We all know that we've got a lot of work to do, but we would be in much worse shape when it comes to the health of the Bay without this coalition and without all your support. So thank you for what you do. We are looking forward to working with you once again in Congress to pull together the resources to help meet our goals of nutrient reduction, pollution reduction in the Bay as part of the 2025 plan. We know we have some states that are lagging behind, and we need to make sure that we push them and provide them with the resources and means to help meet their goals, and also, of course, push the EPA to ensure that the EPA requires all parties to the Chesapeake Bay Agreement, all states, to meet their obligations. We pushed the previous administration to do that, and we need to push the current administration to do that. The good news is, even over the last 4 years, as the previous administration proposed deep cuts in the EPA program for the Chesapeake Bay, we were able to put together, with your help, a bipartisan coalition to actually significantly boost funding for the Chesapeake Bay and Bay programs, including the boost, as you know, to $87.5 million in appropriation and a authorization level now of $92 million. That was a big jump forward, and we are working together as a delegation, Senator Cardin, myself, and the Maryland delegation, together with the Virginia delegation and other Bay states, to request those full amounts, and also to move forward on some of the other authorization programs for the Bay. I want to thank Mariah Davis, Peter Marks, Chris Miller, and really all of you who have been part of this effort as we organize the letter for these programs. And in addition to the regular EPA program, we're also talking about funding the WILD Act. And, you know, the WILD Act was, I think, an important step forward to further engage the Fish and Wildlife Service in Bay restoration efforts. That was a $15 million authorization, and will now be seeking that full amount. Now, that authorization, as you may recall, came sort of late in the process. It was part of the ACE Act. And when I say late in the process, I mean late in the previous appropriations process. So while we did make a last minute request for that authorization. That was really laying the groundwork for this year's request, where we're going to make a major push. I serve on the Appropriations Committee. I serve on the Interior Subcommittee, and we will be seeking those funds. And as you all know, they're designed to help improve stream or tidal and non-tidal wetlands, to improve fish habitats, and to remove barriers to fish migration in freshwater systems. So those are some of the goals of the WILD Act. And now we need to make sure that we get the funding to support those efforts. Another major initiative we've undertaken is the Chesapeake National Recreation Area. I want to thank all of you. Joel Dunn has been very involved in this effort. And we, I think, all share a vision of the Chesapeake Bay as a national treasure and a natural treasure. And we need to make sure that we protect it for generations to come. And one way we think we can help, put down protections for the long term is to include it as part of a national park, national recreation area. And we're working to put together a coalition of stakeholders, including many of you, to advance this effort. Now, we will only introduce legislation when our working group, which we've assembled, comes together and we achieve consensus on the contours of this proposal. And as you all know, we're also in the process of trying to identify, parcels of land for the National Park Service to be the anchor sort of pieces of property for the recreation area. I think, by making this part of the national park system or national park recreation area, I do think we advance our goals of long-term protection of the Chesapeake Bay, and it will also help us bring the additional resources we're going to continue to need from the federal level to meet our goals in terms of protecting the Bay. So those are some of the things I just wanted to highlight that are specific to the Bay. I will just close by also mentioning that President Biden's American Jobs Plan, Infrastructure Modernization Plan, is essential to addressing the immediate danger and the ongoing danger of climate change and the dangers those pose to the Chesapeake Bay, to the country, to the world. And those include, funds to modernize our electricity grid, to move toward clean energy and meet those important goals of net zero by 2050 in terms of carbon emissions, and taking our power grid to net zero by 2035. Thank all of you who've been involved in pushing the state of Maryland in the right direction. Maryland has been one of the national leaders in this effort. And so at the federal level, we're really trying to catch up with your good work through the state legislature on these important issues. In addition to the measures in the American Jobs Bill to directly address and stop climate change, we also have provisions to try to make our infrastructure more resilient. We all know about the flooding in Annapolis. We know that islands in the Bay have disappeared, and others continue to disappear slowly. And we need to make sure that as we work on the most important piece, which is to prevent further climate change, we also need to build a more resilient infrastructure. And so that is another piece of the effort I've been working on in the Appropriations Committee, and look forward to your input on that. We've of course seen the flooding in Ellicott City. I mentioned what was happening in Annapolis. So that is a major dimension piece of the American Jobs Plan, the resilient infrastructure component. So let me end there and end where I started by thanking all of you for what you've done over the years. Without your coalition, we would not be in the place we are. We got a lot of work to do together, but thanks to your efforts, we're in a better starting place than we could have imagined. So let me turn it back over to you, and I'm happy to try and answer any questions that you may have.
Senator Van Hollen, thank you so much for being here today. We really appreciate it. And as you've noted, you've been with us every year for our lobby day or our conference, and we appreciate you keeping up the streak. We have time for a few questions from folks. So the first person I want to call on is Jennifer Orr Green from Trout Unlimited, and she has a question for you about Chesapeake Wild. So I'm going to turn it over to Jen.
Thanks.
Thank you, and good morning.
Morning.
Many coalition members and the coalition were thrilled when you introduced the Chesapeake Wild bill and that it passed in Congress. We've all been working to try and secure funding for the new program, and we're wondering what you think the prospects are for funding the program this year, and what else can we do to help?
Well, first of all, thank you for your help in getting the Wild Act across the finish line in the first place. And now I do think prospects are good for funding. You never know exactly what the appropriation cycle will look like. We're still talking in the Senate about what the overall levels of funding will be for different federal agencies. And we still have not received the Biden administration's budget. All that said, I know that in the House, Bobby Scott and our John Sarbanes and our delegation there is going to be working very hard to secure the funds. And in the Senate, as I mentioned, I serve on the Appropriations Committee and the subcommittee that oversees the Department of Interior and the Fish and Wildlife Service. So with your help, we hope to be able to at least get a down payment, if not the full amount of this appropriation, so that we can get to work. So, but we are going to need your continued help. The delegation is in the process right now of putting together our annual letter with all the Bay related requests, and you can be sure that the Wild Act will be part of that.
Thank you, Chris, and thank you, Jen. Next, I'd like to ask Ben Alexandra with Maryland League of Conservation Voters to ask a question about infrastructure. So Ben, turn it over to you.
Thank you so much. Yeah, and this is about what you touched on earlier with the American Jobs Plan. So as you know, Maryland is one of the most vulnerable states to sea level rise, and climate change could really derail our efforts to save the Bay. From 2010 to 2020, Maryland has experienced 31 extreme weather events, costing the state up to $10 billion in damages. And the president is, of course, calling for the $50 billion to improve the resiliency on infrastructure and support communities' recovery from disaster. So what can you do to ensure that the American Jobs Plan helps address climate change in an equitable way, that climate change, and more importantly, that climate change and clean water is not forgotten in the name of bipartisan support or compromise? And of course, what can we do to be sure to that this program is passed and enacted?
Well, thanks, Ben. As you mentioned, the bill, the American Jobs Plan put forward by President Biden has lots of components, but when it comes to the issues we're talking about today, two big pieces. One is the ambitious and necessary proposal to deal with climate change head on. But it also recognizes that right now we're already experiencing the damage and harmful impacts of climate change. And you mentioned, and I mentioned earlier, Annapolis, sea level rise, impacts on the Bay. And so, as we're also building our 21st century infrastructure and modernize our infrastructure, it only makes sense that we build things to last. And if you go back to the Obama administration, they actually put forward a proposed rule and regulation that said whenever, the federal government is engaged in building infrastructure, it needs to be done in a way that saves taxpayers money and is resilient and protects lives, right? I mean, if you're going to be building in a floodplain, that's not going to be a smart move normally. And if you're going to be building in a place that's especially vulnerable, where the infrastructure is especially vulnerable to climate change, you better be building it to last. So that may cost a little more money up front, but it also means that in the long run, it will save money. So that is a piece of the infrastructure bill, the 50 billion you mentioned. And we're trying to flesh that out right now in terms of the details. If you look at, many of these disasters, after the disasters, we have this sort of ad hoc approach to CDBG grants, community, development and block grants. We're looking at proposals that would allow communities to, use those funds to plan up front to avoid some of the damage from climate change to infrastructure, rather than just be on the emergency end of receiving these funds. So look forward to working with you on that. And again, just to emphasize, as you did, we've got to deal with resiliency. We got to make these investments, but we got to be focused on the big picture as well in terms of stopping climate change and doing it in an equitable manner and making sure that no communities are left behind.
Senator Van Hollen, thank you for your insight on that. Next, I'm going to turn the next question over to Joel Dunn with the Chesapeake Conservancy, and he's going to be asking, I know this is surprising, but about the Chesapeake Bay National Recreation Area.
Well, first, let me say thank you so much for your exemplary leadership, sir. I mean, you're at the epicenter of the movement right now, and we can't thank you enough for all you're doing for our community and for our passionate cause to restore and protect the Chesapeake Bay. I wanted to just take 1 second to recognize the passing of Senator John Warner, who served in the Senate for 5 terms, along with Paul Sarbanes. He was really instrumental in helping start the Chesapeake Bay program and the Chesapeake Trail and a lot of other things you carry the torch forward on today. He was a board member of the Conservancy, and he was one of the kindest men I ever met. He always had to swim wherever we go. It was so funny, but he was very entertaining and just leaves a wonderful legacy. So I just wanted to take 1 second to recognize his leadership. And then parlay that into thanking you for carrying on that legacy, carrying the torch forward. I know Senator Warner was really supportive and excited by your concept of creating this national recreation area. I just wanted to ask, what do you think the prospects are for getting that done in this Congress? I mean, you would think with a Democratic White House, a Democratic House and Senate, we might have some opportunity in the 117th, and we just wanted to hear from you on that.
Well, Joel, first of all, thank you for remembering John Warner. I think, as you said, he was somebody who was very focused on protecting the Bay and its heritage, as was John Sarbanes, as was Mac Mathias, who I worked with way back in the day when I was getting a start. And it's just it speaks to the fact that each of us has a responsibility to sort of take on the torch here and carry it forward. And I want to, again, thank the coalition for their efforts in that regard. And thank you for your leadership when it comes to establishing a national recreation area for the Bay. And you have been a great ally and help in pulling together a coalition. As you and I have discussed, along with others on this call, it's really important that we have a large supportive coalition of all the stakeholders in the Bay, because I do think that the recreation area will benefit the entire Bay community. I think it's important for our long-term protection of the health of the Bay. I also think it's helpful for those who make a living from the Bay. And obviously they have a direct interest in the healthy Bay and sort of a national respect for the Chesapeake Bay as well. So we're going to be working with you and others on this call to bring that coalition together to flesh out the specifics of a legislative proposal. As you know, the National Park Service, representatives in Annapolis are very excited about this prospect. And we are working, of course, to identify the properties that would be the anchor properties for the recreation area. So I do expect, along with John Sarbanes, who's my partner in the House on this, and with the support of Senator Cardin and others, to move forward and introduce this legislation as soon as we're able to nail down some of the commitments on the land, and get a little more wind to our backs from our working group that I hope to bring together in the coming weeks. Obviously, COVID-19 has made it more challenging to sort of bring people together in person, but now that we're beating COVID-19 and turning the corner, I look forward to moving forward. So the goal is certainly to introduce a bill in the coming months, sooner rather than later. I mean, as soon as we get those pieces nailed down, we can move forward. And thanks for all your work on this.
Thank you, sir.
Senator Van Hollen, I know you have to run at 9:25. We really so appreciate you spending the time here and being willing to answer all these questions. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for leading all of these efforts that you have led on the Hill on behalf of the Chesapeake Bay watershed. We really appreciate it. Thank you.
Well, Peter, thank you. Thank you for all you're doing, and to all of you at the coalition. Let's just keep moving. We're heading in the right direction. Take care.
I'm going to turn it over to Chris Miller for some closing remarks. Chris?
Thank you, Peter. And thanks to Senator Van Hollen for joining us this morning. There were a couple of great questions he was able to duck, but that's okay. We can understand. And I know he's going to be a leader on all aspects, including environmental justice and making sure that this is as equitable an effort as possible. I want to join Joel in recognizing the passing of Senator John Warner. He's had been a friend for a long time for me, almost my 30 years in working on the Bay. Just 2 summers ago, we had a big event where he showed up in his double-breasted blue blazer, looking very sharp at 92, and spoke extemporaneously for 20 minutes. He always would start a speech with the comment, "You do never give a senator a microphone," and off he went. But I want to recognize 2 things. One is his leadership of a bipartisan effort on the Bay. He was a Republican and a staunch supporter of Republican values, but led his party in the right direction on clean water and conservation, but even more importantly, in recognizing the reality and imminent threat of climate change. He was an outspoken advocate for addressing climate change and a very early leader in the Republican Party. So we'll miss that leadership. We'll miss his enthusiasm for life. And hopefully we'll be having good remembrances over the coming days. I want to thank all the supporters of folks for this conference. I want to recognize Amy for her incredible job in organizing all the different technologies and sessions. Amy Schofield does amazing jobs behind the scene. It's not in my script, but I want to give her a shout out this morning. We've got a lot of sponsors. The River Otter sponsors, the Alliance for the Shenandoah Valley, the Anacostia Watershed Society, the Chesapeake Legal Alliance, Conservation Voters of Pennsylvania, Delaware Nature Society, Ducks Unlimited, the Land Trust Alliance, Luck Ecosystems, National Aquarium, Southeast Rural Community Assistance Project, Virginia League of Conservation Voters, the Waterkeepers Chesapeake, and the West Virginia Rivers Coalition. Also the Hellbender sponsors, the Chesapeake Bay program, the ELA group, Princeton Hydro, and South Wings. You know, all these sponsorships make a huge difference. It's a good source of revenue for the operations of the Choose Clean Water Coalition, for Peter's hard work, and for all the things that we do together. So it's a great team effort, and thank you all for your support. We have a lot of great sessions today. At 10 o'clock to 10:45, there's breakouts on breaking the barriers to install more riparian buffers. That's something very dear to my heart. I'm planning on tapping in. Controlling stormwater without breaking the bank. I don't know how you do that. It's bigger and bigger problem, but we might learn something from that. And people-powered restoration for clean water. Community-based efforts are so important, and I know that will be an insight on how to build those coalitions. There's some workshops running on empowering diverse communities to take action in stormwater management, and step in, move up, be curious, building a feedback culture. I know we're working on that at PEC and trying to change our work culture to be more inclusive of everyone's ideas. And then from 11:30 to 12:15, we've got 54 tips to become a clean water Rubik's Cuber. I was never successful at that, so I'm not even going to try. Civic engagement and Pennsylvania politics in the Phase 3 whip. We all support that. We probably all should participate. They need help, and we're all here to support each other. And then closing, we'll have a plenary featuring Congressman Bobby Scott from Virginia, and be important to hear his point of view. Big leader in change in the Congress. So we've got a great day. Again, thank you to the team who puts this conference together. We're so looking forward to seeing everyone in person next year. And with that, I'll turn it over to Amy.
We're good to go. Thanks, guys, for coming out this morning, and go hop on those breakout sessions and workshops in about half an hour. Thank you.